Greetings, this is Ty Brown, and welcome to the Business of Creativity podcast, where we highlight leadership, management, entrepreneurship, and all things creativity. I'm joined by Dr. Sonia Toson. Sonia is the Vice President of Organizational Effectiveness, Leadership, and Institutional Development at Kennesaw State. She's also Associate Professor of Business Law, specifically teaching contract negotiations. Greetings, Sonia. Thanks for joining us.
Greetings. It's nice to be here.
Vice President of Organizational Effectiveness, Leadership, and Institutional Development. What does that even mean? Talk to us.
Many things. So organizational effectiveness is really going to, it's as the name implies, whatever your organization is, and we're really talking about sub-organizations, different divisions, units, et cetera. And what are the things that you are doing every day to be efficient and effective? The way we deliver services to help people do that is project management, a lot of process improvement, and then change management, which of course is the people side of all of those fairly technical things. But what are you doing? How do you do it? Is that the best way? And has anybody asked? That's organizational effectiveness. And then when we get into leadership and institutional development, same thing within any given organization, working holistically with the leadership as individuals and as a leadership infrastructure. So that can look like executive coaching. That can look like some really targeted training and workshops there. It can also look like tools like assessments, emotional intelligence assessments, cultural competence assessments, et cetera. And so the institutional development piece comes in because as you do that unit to unit, division to division, eventually you become, in terms of an institution, developed as it relates to your leadership infrastructure.
And so you work with everybody, president's cabinet, all the deans, tell me faculty, staff, tell me about the applying the things that you just mentioned.
Yes, all of the above. So I serve on the president's cabinet, so obviously I'm in close proximity to do that work. And I like to think I'm a trusted colleague. And so if those folks need help, they will, they'll ask me to come and deliver those services. Those are also really my messengers. And so when I want something to happen throughout the entire institution, I start with the cabinet. The cabinet really is going to take care of the administrative side of the house at any given institution, but the academic enterprise really deals with the provost and all of those deans. So by the same token, I'll go and work with them, spread anything throughout, work with a particular academic college with the things that are most relevant to them. And because we are a really broad, large institution, it requires us to really be customized in our approaches. The way that I'm doing leadership development in our College of Engineering is different than the way I do it in the College of Business. It's definitely different than the way I do it in the College of Humanities and Social Sciences. Same themes, same content, but the approach is, I like to call it bespoke.
Is there, of all the things you mentioned in terms of that title, is there something that you spend most of your time on?
Oh gosh, great question. Probably leadership development. I really have a passion for working with leaders on an individual basis and as a collective. I believe most of the great things that you want to do really start with leadership, and most of the things that are negative that you don't want to have happen really start with leadership as well. And so I think you can do a lot by working with leaders, who they are and how they lead.
What does leadership development mean? Tell me about what that is. If you have an approach to it, I imagine you have a philosophy behind it.
We do, although it's emerging, right? We're retooling it. We really want to be intentional in this era of Kennesaw State as to what it means. And more than anything, that means us using shared language and driving really in the same direction. And so we've done leadership development over the years in different places in different ways. We've grown explosively though. So now we really have a need to make sure, again, we have that shared language and we are all saying the same thing when we're asked, what does it mean to lead at KSU? So our approach that is emerging really starts with the individual. And who am I as a leader, right? What am I bringing to this leadership role? What does it mean to lead for me as an individual? And then moving out from there and looking at the context. In any given organization, higher ed is no exception, there are multiple contexts that are relevant to your leadership. So, for example, higher ed is a sector. And so that's the first context you're in. What's happening in higher ed in general. By way of example, a lot of talk about the enrollment cliff. We just have not had enough people born to have the same numbers of a traditional age 18 to 22-year-old students. What does that mean for growth and enrollment trends? I'm at Kennesaw State University in the state of Georgia. And so the laws, the rules and the regulations for the state of Georgia are very relevant. Kennesaw State is a public institution that is a part of a state system. So the University System of Georgia governs through their Board of Regents our institutions and 24 other institutions who work together as sister institutions. So that's another context, right? If the USG gives us a policy, certainly we need to follow that. And then we have the institutional context, right? Kennesaw State has a context. I mentioned some of it. We've had explosive year-over-year growth over the past 7 to 10 years. We serve 51,000 students. 10, 15 years ago, we served like 18,000, right? So that's our context. We have a president that, this is our 6th president. She's been with us for 4 years, right? So that shapes the context as well. And then from there, you have an organizational context. So what's the context in my division, right? We've had a division that has reorganized 3 times in 4 years. So that's a context that we are working in. You've got to be able to interact with all of those different contexts and lead through those lenses, frankly, simultaneously. So contextual leadership is something that we really think is important and is almost unique as it relates to leadership frameworks at universities. And then from there, what are the competencies that you need to do your job? What are those actual skills-based things you do every day? And then our values. Values-based leadership is really important. That kind of shapes our approach, right? We have 5 values: inclusivity, integrity, accountability, collaboration, and accountability. Did I say that?
Yeah,
Integrity. Right. And so, in those contexts, as an individual, am I really mirroring or living KSU's values in the work that I do?
Is it so? You mentioned that the division you're in has been reorged 3 times in 4 years. The president has been there for 4 years. From your lens, as someone who assesses the situation, tell me about that. 3 times in 4 years is a whole lot. Is it because of growth? Is it, different people have coming in, hired, fired, because it's the same president? So she, tell me about what that is.
Yeah. This is really a perfect example of that contextual leadership.
Yeah.
We had some things happen in higher ed that really shaped some of that reorg, part of our portfolio at one time.
Higher ed meaning with the country or meaning on?
Correct.
Oh, okay.
Correct. So when I say higher ed, I'm really thinking nationally. In some respects, internationally. But in this situation, we're really thinking nationally, right?
Okay.
Part of our portfolio was inclusive excellence. And, we needed to make a move where that was more decentralized than centralized.
Yeah.
So we don't need a cabinet level division, arguably. The decision was made that wouldn't happen at a centralized level. And then various iterations of that. And so that higher ed context, there certainly was a state of Georgia context, right?
Yeah.
I am, leading in an institution in the Southeast, and there's been a particular trend with that work. And then, of course, what is our KSU context and what's right for us? So some of the changes that we made in our division, there were different changes that were made in other institutions. That was part of it. The other part of it is, what are the needs of the institution? Is this division well-equipped, well-suited, well-positioned to meet those needs? And so leadership development, organizational effectiveness. You can imagine an institution as a whole that has grown as explosively as ours has, certainly has a great need for process improvement, because who has time to sit back and say, hey, today I'm going to go over all my processes and do standard operating procedures and SOPs and process maps? Nobody does that. But if you're growing year over year over year, you find yourself in 2025 and you may be using a process or really even a mindset from 1998,
Right. It might
or
be
even
outdated.
2020.
Yep.
So those were real needs. Leadership development, as I mentioned, doing a lot of amazing leadership development things, but all kinds of places and all kinds of ways, right? So where's the umbrella? Where's the thread that runs through that gives us that consistency, which of course is the really integral to the quality.
Right. So what I'm trying to hear is, so I hear what you're saying, and it sounds very, it's institutional, it's academic. This is how we approach. What I want to
Yeah.
hear is, where is Dr. Sonia Toson? What is your leadership development, and how does that show up in terms of implementing the things you just said for the institution?
Yeah.
Yeah, give me you.
So I'm an attorney by trade. So I hope your viewers still like me after that.
Yeah.
I'm more of a businesswoman. I'm tenured in the College of Business. I ran my own business for a number of years, still do in some respects. So I'm more of a businesswoman who practiced, knows the law, rather than a lawyer who has a business degree or has done business.
Okay.
And I mention those things because I very much bring them to my work in any given role. I brought it to my approach as a professor, my approach in administrative roles, etc. That's one thing. And so there's a part of me that's very precise, that believes in excellence, that has a standard and works really, really hard. There's also a sort of equal part of me, maybe even an overshadowing part of me, that is highly relational and highly service oriented. And so I've built a reputation, or I believe I have, of really being helpful and having smart strategic solutions. And so, that allows me to do a lot of things, and have a lot of buy-in when I'm doing things all across the university, right? When I say, hey, you know what I mean? We can use this analyst in this way and deal with your processes. I know you loved them, but trust me that there may be something better for you. When it comes to my own team, it's probably the thing I'm most proud of in my career, because it's really hard to lead a team with consistency, having undergone so much change. But I am transparent. The humans that work with me and for me, if you will, are really, really important to me. And I've done my best to advocate for them, to fight for them, to show them that I care and I understand. And because of that, we've had very little turnover, and people are generally happy. We do more things, we do different things. We're constantly evolving and expanding, and they're with me on that ride. And I think that is because I do put humans first, and they see that. I try to uplift them, advocate for them, create more career paths for them, celebrate them. When we have a success, I call their names in rooms that they are not in. And so I think all of that has mattered. They believe me when I say, hey, this is ultimately going to be a good thing. We're together, and I'm looking out for us. I'm fighting these battles up here. You don't have to fight them. If you'll just give me good, excellent work and take care of your families and yourselves and find some joy in what we're doing, I got it.
Your approach to challenges, being on the cabinet, looking at leadership, looking at organizational effectiveness, challenges probably always where I just typically be. Like you just mentioned, having to reorg based on what was going on in the country.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so now, do you reassess everything? Being on the cabinet, I wonder, do you just make your suggestions to the president? Do you have your leeway to say, here's what we're going to do, and I need your okay? Or tell me how that your approach to that is.
Yeah, it's any combination of all of the above. I'm very fortunate. I have what I would consider a very good president, and we have a very good relationship. She was my dean in the College of Business before she was the president. So we know each other. I believe we understand each other, and we have honest conversations. I value the fact that she trusts me, and that doesn't mean we don't co-collaborate. And so almost every single one of these changes, we co-collaborated. I strongly believe in, where possible, controlling my and our destiny. And so we worked out a lot of things together and proactively for what we believed and still believe was for KSU's good, as well as the good of our division, as well as me as an individual and her as a president. And we did that together. And it was a lot of hard conversations over a lot of months. But I appreciate that she cared enough to have conversations with me and us to co-create our path.
So you really have to know each other to get down to that level, right? The institution, the division, the person, your role,
Yeah.
my role, what I value, what you value. Is that her relationship with everybody, or is that like because you had this past? Like, tell me about. I mean, obviously you're not in her seat, but just tell me about
Sure.
your perception of that throughout the institution.
Yeah. I mean, I think you have to know each other, but deeper than that to trust each other,
Mhm.
right? And so is it relevant that she's known me for a number of years, a decade now, over a decade?
Right.
And so there is a trust that Sonia's going to move this particular way. And I am sure I surprise her at particular times. But I think if she were sitting here, she would rattle off 3 or 4 things she can count on with me. And hey,
Right.
I'm not saying all of them are good, right?
Yep.
I really believe I can do the same. Does she have that in equal measure with every single cabinet member? I don't necessarily know that. I do know that, what I respect about her is that she knows her cabinet very, very well. She's picked a really, really great cabinet. And so she might trust me for a strategic decision and for strategy, right? She
Mhm.
might say, go over here in this unit, in this division, and help them craft a strategy. She might go to someone else to say, hey, we need something that's really fun and engaging, right? I like to think I'm fun and engaging too. But you see what I'm saying? She
Yeah.
trusts us for different things in different ways. She and I are very similar. So
Mhm.
again, does that deepen the relationship? Probably so.
So one more question along the lines about relationship with the president. You've seen
Yeah.
her. Well, you've I guess reported to her when
Yeah.
she was dean, and now she's president, and you
Yeah.
see her as president having to be over a whole lot more. Are there
Mhm.
things that you've, for the lack of a better word, learned that you like? Okay, maybe I'll apply some of this to how I lead or manage things. Is that something that you've seen?
Yeah, are there things I've learned from her?
Yeah, 100%. And
Yeah, a
seeing her
great many
progress to
things.
the position she's in now. Yeah.
Yeah, a great many things. There are a great many things I admire. There are times when people, her included, talk to me about pursuing a presidency, and it's interesting because when I look at her, when I look at me, I feel that there's a significant gap.
Okay.
But, I'm very observant. And again, part of strategy is collecting information, right? And I've collected a lot of data from her over the years. I think a few of the keys to her success and a few of the things that I've learned is that she's a great listener. She trusts her cabinet, right? You have a lot of presidents that sort of command their cabinets, and
Okay.
certainly she is in charge. She is going to make clear the directive. But part of the role of a cabinet member is not to just do work product in your particular portfolio. It is to counsel your president. And that doesn't work if the president doesn't listen to a particular kind of expertise that is likely greater than yours.
Yeah.
So what I have found that she does very, very well is listen to her cabinet and learn from her cabinet. And I've observed that. I've observed her approach and her demeanor and really being out front with her own love of humanity. She cares deeply about our students. She cares deeply about humans in general. You don't always find a president that gets choked up when she talks about the success of our students, right? Student
Yeah.
success is kind of a buzzword. So she really believes that. I've watched her poise and her presence in some of those out front situations, as well as some of those closed door, difficult situations, and a lot of grace, you know what I mean, there. So those are some of the things I'm learning.
Yeah,
I'm sure
it's
there are a
interesting.
bunch of others.
It's interesting. The first thing you said you learned from her sounds like how when we were talking about your team and what you're proud of in terms of listening to them and understanding
Yeah,
who they are and
yeah.
value and the communication.
And I
Actually,
think that's why we have such a good relationship, because we do think the same way
yeah.
about some really core principles and
Mhm.
leadership.
Yeah, I think that's excellent. You told me before that one of the things that you have a gift for is taking complex topics
Yeah.
and then making them very practical. Give me
Mhm.
some insight on that. Or okay, go hold on. Give me insight on that and what that means, but then also tell me how your brain works when you have a bunch of things that are complex and intertwined, and then being able to explain it to somebody so that they understand it in a practical sense.
Yeah. I fear that I'm going to give you a poor answer, but I'm going to give it to
There's
you.
no poor answers.
So, Okay, good. That makes me feel great. Yeah, I mean, I'll take the law, for example, right? I'll put on my professor hat, right? There are many who would describe the law as this complex, interconnected web of laws and historical legal philosophies and theories that all shape out to produce the law, right? And it's a law, it's a rule. By definition, it is a line in the sand, it's black or white. And of course, it's anything but that. This is why when you ask attorneys a question, they almost always are going to give you some version of maybe or it depends, because that's true. It's very nuanced. That being said, I think there's some elitism in the mystifying of it. It frankly isn't as complicated as some would make it seem. And so how is it that I'm in a law class talking about the concept of jurisdiction or constitutional law, right? We're hearing a lot about constitutional law, what's legal and what's not legal. And how does it happen in my brain that I break it down? I'm big on analogies and examples, and I see connections, right? That is, if you're using strengths language, Gallup's strengths language, that is part of my strategic strength, which is my number one strength. I see patterns and roadmaps and connections. And so I teach things in a way, or explain things to a colleague in a way where I'm going to give them examples and connections. I'm a lover of words. So what are the words I use to get you to understand what I'm trying to get you to understand in a way that it sticks, that it's relatable to you? That really is my gift, if you will. So I don't know if I do a particular thing. Well, I do know. I don't do a particular thing. I just see it that way, right? There may be a law that's complex, and I see it 5 different ways. And so I can give you any one of those 5. And one of them is going to be something that is relatable, right? I might describe it in terms of athletics. I have a lot of athletics examples, which don't always work well internationally, because I'm usually talking about football. I might explain it in terms of a cooking reference, right? If you can make tacos, and starting from what you get at the store to putting it on a plate, you can do project management, right? Despite all the certifications and PMI and all of that. It's essentially what it is. So that's just what's natural to me. I can't even call it an approach.
Okay. Give me an example in either organizational effectiveness, leadership, or institutional development of you taking something complex, right, and then making it practical for whoever is the receiver of that genius.
Yeah. Trying to think of an example that I didn't already use, right? So I think one of the examples is contextual leadership. When I'm explaining to people what that is and how it works, I'm going to do it kind of in the way that I described, right? So here's an example of what's going on in higher ed in general. Okay. I'll take it further. How might that play out? Given the top 10 stories you heard in the news. Oh, the Department of Ed is maybe being broken up. What does that mean? Well, let's talk about that that's a national lens. Let's talk about it through an organizational lens. What does that mean for our financial aid department, right? What does that mean for student loans? What does that mean in terms of the work product, without being too complicated, and some of the compliance-based areas that you might be working in, for example, with organizational effectiveness? From a leadership perspective, if you have the financial aid department in your portfolio, right, how are those people feeling? And so now we're bringing it back to the humanity part of it. Are they fearful that they're going to lose their jobs, right? How much information can you give them in a way that's practical, that can maybe ease some of that angst? Yeah, I'd say it that way.
Teaching contract negotiation. I imagine out of everything you just said, it's probably some version of that, right? Taking something complex, understanding it on a practical level, and then being able to apply it on a practical level so I can get what I want, or so we can get what we want out of this negotiation. Tell me a little bit about applying everything you told me. Does it apply to when you're talking about contract negotiations in your associate professor?
Yeah.
Because it may not.
Well, it does, but I'm going to say to a lesser degree.
Mm-hmm.
So when I'm teaching contract negotiations, there's much less of me lecturing, if you will, which is a tragedy because I have entertaining lectures. But no, I don't believe that me telling you, even if I'm telling you in a practical way, an engaging way, a humorous way, this is how integrative negotiations versus distributive negotiations work, right? And this is the intersection between your conflict resolution and negotiation style and the particular situation and the matrix between the relationship and the importance. Anyway, I can say all of those things. I can explain it. I can give you a great example that really resonates with you. Negotiation is the kind of thing that you have to live and see. You have to have an experience.
Okay.
And that's why that class for me is 80% negotiation simulations. So I'm going to give you a little of this. You've got to have the information. You're going to read it on your own. You're reading on your own. It's complex. I'm going to give you 4 or 5 ways to demystify it, if you will.
Yeah.
And then you're going to go do it. And to be honest, that's where the real learning happens. Because when we debrief after you've done that simulation, you saw it.
Yeah.
And there is no, replacement for you seeing it and living it and experiencing it.
Okay.
And it's negotiation is in some respects, depending on who you are, rather uncomfortable. So that's yet another reason to be in it.
Yeah.
Right. And see how it feels. It's also real time. You have to think on your feet. So in my opinion, that's the best way to teach it.
Interesting. What got you to that as a in the academic sense, right? I don't know what the businesses you've had. You said you had businesses, and now you're like not as much as business, but still are. Like, what got you to teaching contract negotiations?
Well, people like lawyers to teach it because we do a lot of negotiations. And, there are different types of attorneys. Most of what we think of when we think of an attorney is what we see on Law and Order, which is a litigation attorney, a courtroom attorney, which is actually not the kind of law I practice.
Okay.
I like it. I was good at it, but it wasn't particularly appealing to me to argue all day. It's not what you're doing. So I was a transactional attorney, right? And absolutely, contract negotiations is what you're doing. We're sitting around a table, hammering out a deal or going back and forth. And ultimately, we get to the end of that and everyone wins. Everyone has some level of their interest met. If it's me, I like it to be, and everyone has made money.
Yeah.
So that body of experience is really how I got there. Yeah.
Oh yeah, interesting. And you like it? Like this is a passion, or this is just a trading time for money situation? Okay.
I mean, teaching is my, I think, true love in general. It is how I went from practicing law, which is the business that I had. I owned my own firm, to teaching. I taught one class as an adjunct and fell in love with it. And was so excited. I don't think I taught that first class particularly well, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But students loved it. And that is, I think, part a natural gift that's divinely given to me, and my enthusiasm for it. And I had good war stories, right? I had good practical, here's how it really happens. This is what your book says, but here's how it really happens when you're doing a deal kind of thing. And from there, it was really a marrying of what was my body of experience and my interest in the kind of classes that I'm going to teach. So I teach three primary classes, and I love them all, probably equally, for different reasons. I teach business law, so that's all the foundations of the law you need to be engaged in business. I teach negotiations, and I teach employment law. Business law I love because inevitably there's a point in that class where somebody has a spark and they're like, I actually like the law. Yeah. You know what I mean? And you have a lot of those people going to law school. Employment law I like because there are a lot of rich discussions. A lot of employment law deals with the discrimination. So the conversations you're having about race and gender and religion and what is illegal and what's not illegal. Hate speech is not illegal.
Yeah.
From a First Amendment standpoint, let me say it like that. So as not to confuse with hate crimes and some other things. Negotiations I like because it's a fascinating sort of social experiment, right? I have a lot of colleagues that are psychology professors, and I'm like, y'all have to come and collect data and just sit in the back of the room and see people interact and what happens from a social experiment standpoint. Will they lie? Will they cheat? What are the creative ways that they're going to get to the solution? And what will be their reactions afterwards? It's fascinating. So.
Yeah, interesting. I'll ask this
Yeah.
last thing and then we'll wrap. I want you to, I've seen you give a presentation on change, right? Um,
Oh,
and one of the words you used were change from the perspective of thriving. I
yeah.
mean, perspective of change to thriving during change and not just surviving during change.
Yeah.
Educate us a little bit. Give us one or two things that we can do, and we being me and whoever else decides to listen to this episode, in terms
Hmm.
of surviving in change. I've worked with a lot of people who work in college athletics, and college
Yeah.
athletics is crazy. And so, talk to us a little about change from a perspective of thriving instead of surviving. And what
Yeah.
can we do? How do we apply whatever you're about to tell us right now?
Absolutely. I'm big on practical tools. I mean, I'm a
Yep.
professor, so I like to leave people with homework. So this
Hmm.
is perfect. Um, yeah, the title of that presentation was Change is the Game.
Right.
And that's one of the major keys. We tend to experience change as something that has happened to us versus something that is. And both are in some respects true, but change is going to happen. And so, really, the first step is to sort of soak that into your system, really absorb that as a principle, a context, if you will, in which you're leading. And so, once you know that, what is your next step, right? It's to prepare for it constantly before it happens. And the reason that you do that is so that when it happens, because it's a when and not an if, you're not so thrown on your back foot, right? Change happens to all of us regularly. Athletics is a major example of that. Administrations come, administrations go, head coaches are here, their whole staff goes with them. There is a lot of change. And in that, industry, it's not just this is a change in my organization, I'm doing something different. I might be across the country, doing something different at an entirely different organization or institution. So, given that, what are the things that I do that prepare myself for it? One of the things I do is to kind of run myself through scenarios, run my team through scenarios, right? If our whole staff gets broken up, how will we do the work? If I need to move across the country, what does that look like? If I'm coaching at a D1 institution and I somehow end up at a D3 institution, what does that look like? What will I do? How will I feel about it? And getting some of that out of the way, if you will. I like to do that on multiple levels because it's never going to happen exactly the way we think it might. But if you thought about it a few different ways and a few different ways to approach it, one of them is going to work. One of them is going to work. And so then when it happens, it is a matter of, okay, I've prepared for this. Now, can I step out of the moment and think about how I can convert this change that has happened to me to something that I leverage for strategic success? So much of it is mindset, right?
Okay.
And again, I would not lie to you or your audience and say that it is easy and the thing that's happening is a good thing. But if we can figure out some kind of way that it can be useful for our personal success, it shapes how we think about it, and that's how you end up thriving,
Have you seen
right?
have you seen someone do that? Take this change that is happening and
Yeah.
how it affects me, and how can I leverage that for to thrive? Have you either coached somebody or seen somebody who has done that to help themselves out?
Yeah, I certainly have needed to do it for myself and my
Okay.
entire division,
Yep.
right? And
Yep.
so they've really strengthened that muscle. I absolutely have worked with coaches.
Yep.
And what's helpful, both as an executive coach to them, right? So
Hmm.
dealing with what they're doing in their personal leadership and with their teams. And I think sometimes you just have to, if this isn't something that you do naturally for yourself, you have to hear someone describe it in a different way.
Okay.
So you were coaching here and then you were coaching there. What opportunities exist there to do something you've never done, greater, better, more personally fulfilling? Is there anything? It's rare that there's a change or there's nothing that's going to be. Now, it might be one thing out of 10, but if it is one thing that's going to make you better, make your existence better, your life better, can we ground there? Can we ground there and go from there?
Right.
You don't have the capacity to do a whole bunch of stuff in the midst of change, which is one of
Right.
the reasons I say try to do it before. But even then, I don't think it's necessarily about doing some big sweeping thing. It is about, can I change my mind 1%, 2%, 10% every day? Can I focus on anything that might be a good piece of it? and an opportunity, and really ground there and keep my focus there. You know, when people say keep the main thing, can I make that the main thing in my mind, at least?
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm gonna try to give an analogy, and you'll correct me. Okay. Higher education, right? Changes from the government that are attacking
Mhm.
things that include inclusion or diversity or whatever, right?
Climate, offices of sustainability,
All
you
the
name it.
things, right? And so I'm in an office, and part of my role is inclusion.
Yeah.
If underlyingly as an institution, we understand that inclusion and equity is better for the institution, we probably don't need to name it that because change is happening. But
Mhm.
if we change the name of it for some type of something that helps out the institution as a whole, which inclusion and equity and all the things did,
Mhm.
we are leveraging change to better the institution by changing a title and possibly the role to continue doing what we were doing initially, but on a broader scale.
Yeah.
Does
Yeah.
that?
I think that's a perfect example. You know, I
Okay.
spent a lot of time in that area. I spent a
Yeah.
lot of time counseling others in that area, and it's difficult because you are looking at the institution's values, perhaps intersecting or becoming misaligned with your personal values.
Yeah.
And so, what I had to determine for myself and what I shared with others is, you know, you got to unpack what you're doing and why.
Yeah. And
What
what
did
exactly
inclusion
is it
mean in
that
the
you're
first?
doing, right? Yeah.
What does inclusion mean in the first point,
Yeah.
and why was it important to you?
Hmm.
Those things likely haven't changed. And
Right.
so, what really is the context? The context may be that these words have become political tools.
Exactly.
The words themselves, and not necessarily the concepts. And if in fact that is the case, then we need to ask ourselves, are we attached to the words or are we attached to the work?
Exactly.
And that is the question that I would ask people. I realized that I was attached to the work. So, what's the work I'm truly doing? And how does it happen? It happens pervasively in organic ways throughout an institution, right? And yes, perhaps if the words are the problem, are there the words for it?
Yeah.
But it's really kind of going back to the root of what you were doing and why. If you were looking for diverse perspectives in a room to further innovation, those things probably haven't changed. So how are we getting to that in a way that's not so caught up in words?
In words,
And if you
exactly.
spend time thinking about that before it happened to you, you were ready to go in some particular directions.
Yeah. Excellent. Are you attached to the words or the work?
The work.
Right. So that was a good example then when I just gave a little
Yeah.
analogy. That was
There we
very good.
go. It was perfect example. Well
Excellent.
done.
Well, Dr. Sonia Toson, this has been an excellent conversation. I really appreciate you joining us here on the Business of Creativity podcast.
Yeah, it's been my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, ma'am. That was Dr. Sonia Toson. Sonia is the Vice President of Organizational Effectiveness, Leadership, and Institutional Development and Associate Professor of Business Law at Kennesaw State. And of course, I am Ty Brown with Business of Creativity. And keep in mind, the role of a leader is to create and maintain an environment that people want to be a part of. And as always, be better tomorrow than you are today.